week now, it seems to have picked a side and firmly in the side of Pakistan. The Chinese foreign minister dialed his Pakistani counterpart. Wang Yi spoke with Ishaq Dar and said that China is closely following developments. He also described the China-Pakistan friendship as an ironclad friendship and an all-weather strategic partnership. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also said they support exactly the phrase that was used by Pakistan, an impartial investigation. While claiming that China fully understands Pakistan's legitimate security concerns, Beijing also called on both India and Pakistan to exercise restraint, meet each other halfway, and promote the cooling of the situation.
India and Pakistan are both important countries in the southern Asia. The peaceful coexistence between the two countries is important to the peace and development of the region. As a neighbor to both India and Pakistan, China hopes India and Pakistan will exercise restraint, work in the same direction, and jointly uphold peace and stability in the region.
All right, I want to go across to our guests. Professor Brahmachalani, Strategic Affairs expert, is joining us. Professor Victor Gao is Vice President for the Center for China and Globalization and Chair Professor at the Suzhou University. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Professor Chalani, let me start with you first. So, right after this Pahalgam incident, where the entire international community has joined India in solidarity, condemning what happened, expressing support for India, the Chinese Foreign Minister has spoken with his Pakistani counterpart and once again described Pakistan as an all-weather strategic partner and an ironclad brother. How does China reconcile the international condemnation for this terror incident and generally international condemnation and growing intolerance for any kind of terror incident with this kind of almost unreserved support that it has expressed for Pakistan?
China has long shielded Pakistan's cross-border terrorism internationally, and also by coming to Pakistan's rescue at critical moments. The fact is that even today, when Wang Yi spoke with the Pakistani Deputy Prime Minister cum Foreign Minister, he hailed Pakistan's quote-unquote strong counter-terrorism measures. So here is Wang Yi openly siding with the country that actually has orchestrated the latest civilian massacre in Pahalgam. None of this should come as a surprise to anyone because China has deep strategic links with Pakistan. It aided Pakistan's nuclear weapons program. It transferred complete missile systems to Pakistan. It has thousands of regular Chinese troops stationed in Gilgit-Baltistan, and there are many other Chinese troops stationed across Pakistan, namely to protect Chinese projects in Pakistan, including in Balochistan. So given these deep security and strategic linkages that China has with Pakistan, we shouldn't be surprised that Wang Yi has unabashedly come to Pakistan's rescue once again.
Okay.
In fact, according to some reports, according to some reliable reports, I should say, that China has been rushing air-to-air missiles and other weapon systems to Pakistan in recent days so that Pakistan can counter possible Indian reprisal strikes.
I do want to ask Professor Victor Gao this. I mean, at a time when there is zero tolerance for terror and even India criticizes and issues statements of condemnation whenever there are these EATM attacks that happen in Xinjiang and other western parts of China, how can the Chinese foreign minister continue to call Pakistan an ironclad brother and an all-weather strategic partner and also use the same language which the Pakistani side is using, calling for an impartial probe, when in the past, impartial probes have really not got anywhere for India in terms of, calling out these terror groups and getting the Pakistani state to act against these terror groups. In fact, I was Googling whether China and the Foreign Ministry of China has ever, even once, despite all of these years of terror attacks, even once used the name of Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed in any of its official statements, and it hasn't.
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, the deterioration of the situation between India and Pakistan, as we speak, is a reason for great concern. These are two big countries, both armed with nuclear weapons, and over the decades they have fought many times. So this is the right time to call on both India and Pakistan to exercise the maximum restraint and seek a peaceful solution, because otherwise the consequence will be too much for either India or Pakistan to bear. Now, secondly, when you talk about terrorist attacks, you may know inside Pakistan, there have been terrorist attacks against the Chinese nationals. And we actually lost quite a few Chinese nationals inside Pakistan. But we always called for a thorough investigation into what exactly is happening behind the scene, who was pulling the trigger, who was committing all these atrocities. And I think China is using the same philosophy to apply to this particular round of attack, because the attack may be initiated by anyone rather than by the government of Pakistan. This is time for both India and Pakistan and all the other stakeholders to work very closely to get to the bottom of the situation, rather than allowing this attack to be the
Professor
trigger
Gao,
of
last
escalation.
year when there were the Chinese CPEC projects that were attacked in Balochistan, and I saw the Foreign Ministry's statement, it did not mince any words. It certainly did not call Pakistan an ironclad brother in the aftermath of the attacks that killed Chinese nationals in Balochistan.
The point is very simple. We need to call for impartial and complete and thorough investigation into the background of this attack before any country should seize this opportunity to use this attack as the trigger for escalation of tensions or even conflict between India and Pakistan. Now, the third point I want to add, please, with your permission, is that China and Pakistan are all-weather ironclad allies. No one should second-guess this alliance between China and Pakistan. China will always come to Pakistan's help and assistance whenever Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity will be threatened by any country. So this is a very serious matter. You're talking about a war between Pakistan and India on the one hand, and then you are talking about an ironclad alliance between China and Pakistan, and China's full commitment to defend Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
I'm glad, Professor Gao, you've been upfront here on our show. Professor Chalani, at least you can't fault him for hiding the Chinese game. He's upfront and he's saying that it'll come to Pakistan's defense, which is its ironclad brother. I was going through the amount of weapons that the Chinese have supplied to Pakistan. It's full of 2 pages full, from JF-17 fighter jets to Yuan-class submarines to the P-10 and P-15 missiles. I mean, 60% of Pakistan Army's weaponry today comes from China. And Professor Gao, I have issues with what you said, but I certainly will not fault you for being forthright. So, Professor Chalani.
Well, this attempt to draw a false equivalence argument, trying to place the victim and the attacker on par, and then distorting why Chinese nationals have been killed in Pakistan. They have been killed in Pakistan because they have pursued projects in areas of separatist unrest. These separatist groups have warned China against exploiting the mineral resources and other natural resources in those lands, especially Balochistan. And yet China, with the assistance of the Pakistan military, has engaged in reckless exploitation of the mineral wealth of Balochistan. That's the reason why Chinese nationals have come under attack in Pakistan. In this case, there is one nation whose military has had long-standing ties with terror groups, cozy relationships with these terror groups, which has been responsible for serial attacks on civilians in India, that has been labeled by the West as a mecca of terrorism. China today has the audacity to defend Pakistan and to say openly that it will come to Pakistan's assistance if its territorial sovereignty and integrity are threatened. The fact is that this nexus between China and Pakistan is a clear warning to India that India faces two regional adversaries, both of which are nuclear armed, both of which are revisionist past. Yeah. They are revisionist because they seek to change their borders with India. Both are not content with the status quo. Both are openly hostile to India. And therefore, India should be under no delusion.
No, India should claw back on this whole road to normalization. I mean, we have just announced that we're resuming the Mansarovar Yatra. We've just announced that we're resuming direct flights between Delhi and Beijing. India should claw back. I mean, today, Professor Gao, there are credible media reports, there is satellite imagery to show that Chinese logistical movements, including fuel and engineering supplies near Pakistan's northern regions. Can you categorically confirm or deny to our viewers who are watching here in India that if a situation were to escalate between India and Pakistan, that China will not come to Pakistan's aid, providing it military and logistical supplies?
Thank you very much. Allow me to make several very brief points. First of all, I have great respect for India as a country and as a nation. On the other hand, allow me to emphasize the size of the Chinese economy today is about 5 times as big as India's economy. This is the reality. But the point is, if India wants to shut itself out of China, it's in the detriment of the Indian people. So don't talk to me about closing China away from India, because you will do that with great harm to the fundamental interest of the Indian people. That's number one. Number two is don't ever underestimate China's commitment to Pakistan to defend Pakistan's legitimate interest of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are ironclad brothers and sisters.
So, Professor Gao, does China not have an iota of concern for the innocent civilians, the tourists who were killed in Kashmir? So the next time there are terror groups attacking Xinjiang, India should welcome that.
We call for investigation. That's why we call for investigation. You can set up an investigation sponsored by the United Nations, for example, or even through the United Nations Security Council. But an investigation will be crucially important.
Will China also call for an investigation after ETIM attacks Chinese citizens in Xinjiang?
Xinjiang is purely China's internal matter, and no one has a say in whatever that happens in Xinjiang.
So how come Kashmir is not India's internal matter? How come Kashmir is not India's internal matter?
Don't compare. Well, it's a disputed land, may I say that, and it is well acknowledged throughout the world. There is no single sovereignty over Kashmir.
The right of India, the sovereignty of India over Kashmir is well established. Today, after the abrogation of Article 370, there is no difference between Kashmir and any other province of India. So for you to sit here and lecture us that Xinjiang is an internal matter, but Kashmir is not, I'm sorry, that's a double standard. And it's there for all our viewers to see and judge.
With due respect to you, the disputed status of Kashmir is a well-recorded fact.
What is the dispute? What is the dispute? We're not sending majority population there and repopulating the place. We're not suppressing minorities and sending them to re-education camps.
Well, you need to read the history about Kashmir ever since India and Pakistan became independent countries.
Professor Gao, I wish I had the time to go into a history lesson, but we'll leave it at that. I don't think what the Chinese state has done in Xinjiang must be also part of those history books. But we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Professor Gao and Professor Chalani, for joining us.